Hi, this is Brian with King Grizzly, and I want to show you today how I rebuilt the Tesla.com homepage using the Elementor Visual Builder. Whether you are a beginner or an expert, I think you'll find this interesting. This is the page I built, right? It's got this nice scroll snapping, and this is the Tesla.com homepage that I was mimicking with Elementor. So let's take a look at how I did it. Okay, so the first thing is, let's take a look at this Tesla homepage. It's a scroll snap. So if I scroll, it's going to jump from panel to panel. It'll change the info that you see about the products. And as we get further down, the CTAs, the buttons change a little bit. And there's a little footer here. The menu system has a nice little kind of hover effect. And then there is this one flyout that's available. So if we take a look at what I built, very similar. I borrowed their pictures just on my local machine. I won't publish this. I will delete them afterwards. Just wanted to see what Elementor could do. So you can see I've replicated a flyout. My hovers are just a little bit different. I went with the out-of-the-box options from Elementor so that even a beginner could try to replicate this. Well, that's not entirely true. This little hover effect here, I wrote a couple lines of code, but it's not required. I'll show you how I did it. You could also just leave a regular underline effect on a link, but really this doesn't require any code. So yeah, very close. It's mobile responsive too. I will get into that, but let's just jump into how did I do it. So here is the Elementor page editor. I am in WordPress, logged into my Tesla page, and you can see in the navigator on the right, I have these sections, which yes, they correspond to like HTML sections, but I've got one for each of the products, plus the nav at the top. And the basic concept is, first, we need to turn on scroll snapping in Elementor, or I suppose we could do it last after we built the panels. And the way you do that is to click this little gear in the bottom left for settings, and then go to advanced, and there's this new scroll snap feature. I turn it on, I set the snap position to top, and the scroll snap stop to normal. If you want to learn about Elementor scroll snapping, there are tutorials, but for our purposes, we just need to turn this on, so when we scroll from panel to panel, it will snap. Now, I will mention that this is not perfect inside the visual editor. As I'm working on the panels, it has a little trouble jumping around, but I found if I just kind of scroll here to the panel I want to work on and click on it, it does fine. Or you could just turn scroll snapping on after you built the panels. I think I prefer to work with scroll snap turned off while I build the panels, and then when I'm ready, I turn it on. It makes it a little easier in the visual builder. So really we just have these sections, and each section I would add a full width to the content width, and then a minimum height of 100 vertical height at least. So on this first panel, I think due to some margins that I had on my nav or one of these elements, it seemed like it wasn't quite acting like 100% high. So I added an extra 2. But on, say, like Model Y, if I scroll down to Model Y and go to Layout, you can see the height's 100. Just to show you real quick, if you add a new section in Elementor, I can do one column out of the box. I'm going to switch box to full width, and then the minimum height to vertical height 100, and then that will be 100%. So I'm going to delete that. And then what we do, we'll go back up to Model 3. We need to set the background image. So I click on that, and I borrowed from the Tesla site. They had a desktop version and a mobile version. And so I'd insert the desktop, insert media, and then I can switch using this device switcher here, responsive mode. And I went down to the mobile version, and I changed that background image here to the mobile. So on Elementor, you can actually set tablet, desktop, or mobile background images to be different. So I went ahead and went with Tesla's model of a desktop and a mobile one. So we've got the image. I set the position to center. I set it to cover. So by default, I can't remember if it covers that panel or not. I was thinking about it. So it's kind of zoomed in. I want to go, I fiddled with these, and cover seems to be, this will ensure that the section is always covered by the background image. So there we have the image, and we have the 100% height. But what I had to do in Elementor to get the text to kind of sit up here and these buttons to sit down here is I dropped in, how did I do it? I dropped in intersections and I renamed them. So this is an intersection widget that I renamed to text. And inside of it, I placed the heading widget and the text editor widget. So what I did is I went over to intersection, dragged it onto this page, into the section, and then I put a heading and the text inside of it. And that's really all I had to do. And this is the only thing that I added a little extra CSS for. So like this link here, I kind of like their little hover effect. So I wanted to show, I think I threw the code on the nav panel here. This is the only code I wrote. I basically said for the text link inside of a paragraph to do this little effect. So we actually use a box shadow to simulate an underline, and then the hover state we set to 2 pixels. So it goes from 1 pixel to 2 when I hover. And I actually wrapped each section in a class called Tesla panel. That's how I made my CSS specific. But I didn't have to do that. I just did it for fun. So going back to the intersections that I added, I have the text and then I have the CTA buttons. How did I get them to space like this? So I clicked on the column for the section and I set the vertical line to space between. So what happens is I have 2 intersections. And so it's going to put space between. Now, if I did space around, it would create even space around them. But there's different settings here. I could set them to be at the top. But what I did is I wanted space between because I only have these 2 items. So it spaces them nicely. And then on that column, I set some padding. So on the top, I put 150 pixels to push model 3 down. And on the bottom, I set 25 to push it up a little bit. And the final piece was I added these 2 buttons and I dropped in an icon. So the icon just, it comes with Elementor. I can choose a different one from the icon library. It's just font awesome. And what I did is I actually match under advanced motion effects, the entrance animation, it actually bounces. So I can change this. So this little guy down here will bounce. And I think I even set it so that when I hover it, there's a float effect, right? So if we were to look at the Tesla one, I'll go up to that first panel. You can see they've got a little animation going on. So we replicated something similar here. In terms of the buttons, if we click on a button, nothing special going on. I typed in my text for style. I set my typography to what I wanted, Montserrat, kind of set my height and spacing. And then on the button, I set the border width. Well, they did have this effect. Like they seem to have an active state where there's like, if you hover it, there's a border, but then there's a border around the border. And so I did, in order to do that, I guess that's a little bit fancy, is I set a border width of 2 pixels and I gave it a transparent color. But then on hover, it gets a white on this one. But then how do I have a border outside of that when I'm hovering, right? Because shouldn't the white be on the edge? Well, the trick is, besides setting a border radius to round the button quarters and a padding around the text, right? So I can change these settings and it changes how the button looks. I can also go to advanced and I can set another border. And so this is the border for the widget itself. And so I set a solid border to 2 pixels and I can set hover states if I want or normal. So what I did is I made a border that matched the dark background color. So there's like 2 borders going on. If that's perplexing, I'm sorry if I explained it badly. But I did that over here too, and I just changed the color values. So that's really all that was needed. And then as we go down to mobile, when I click on the button, if we go back over to the content, I changed the alignment to be justified, which means it'll go 100% wide. And I also went on the desktop to get them to sit next to each other. I went to positioning and I set a custom width for each button. So I chose this. If I chose default, they'd be 100% wide, but I changed it to custom and I can set any pixel width I wanted. So I set it to 275, but when we get down to mobile, I said, hey, I want this thing to be 90% of the vertical width. And that's very similar to what Tesla does on their phone view. If I go to preview, you can see there's the unscrolled version of it. So that's how the buttons are working. This little guy here, the arrow, I linked it to a jump link. So if I click on it and go to you can see I linked it to the Model Y section. So if I go to that section and go to advanced, you'll see I set, actually I need to set an ID. model Y. So now that if I click on that icon, it will push me down to model Y, but really it gets repetitive after this. So I could actually right click and duplicate model 3. And so then I had my foundation for model Y. I changed my text. I changed my two background images if I need to change links. But really, I'm done. So what about the nav? So the nav, I have a section, and inside of it, I have some sort of inline position items. First of all, I set a negative margin because if I don't do that, then the nav sits way up there, right? So I put negative, I think I figured out negative 60, nicely dropped it down. So you can move it down. So now it's overlapping. On that particular nav, I have a full width. I've vertically aligned the items inside of it to the middle. So if I put top, you can see the content moves up, bottom, but I want them to be in the middle. But it's full width. If I go to style, there's no background color set. It's just transparent by default. And then what I did with this one, whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. Is for each of these items, like the Tesla logo, this looks freaky at first. All I really did is I dropped in an HTML widget. So like if I go to my widgets, HTML, you can actually put code in. Well, SVG images are actually, you can get a block of code. So I just dropped their logo code in there. And then what's cool is I can actually give a width. If I go to advanced and positioning, I gave a custom width to that HTML widget of 115 pixels. Now, alternatively, I could have gone to image, dropped an image in here, uploaded an SVG just like a normal picture and set a width on the image. I just chose to put that code inline. I think it might be a little more performant. And then I went over to WordPress appearance menus, and I just added a few menus. Tesla main nav, then I have like a footer menu and so forth. So I can then, using a menu widget that I dragged onto the page, I was able to go choose which navigation I wanted to show, and I styled it to make it look like the Tesla site. So I have a horizontal aspect to it. I set the pointer to background effect. So when I hover it, I get a background, and then I'm able to style up the animation. I could have done other things like a underline and so forth. If I go to style, these are the style settings for the nav. So how much padding do I want above, next to my text? Do I want a border radius? So that, that's going to apply on these hover effects. I can adjust the hover active states. I can set my type. And also here, I did the same thing, but you can see I've got this like grayed out thing over here. What this is it's for the tablet and mobile view. So on the mobile view, it looks weird because some of these things are hidden, but if I go to preview, you can see, oh, okay, here's the logo and here's the menu trigger. And so what's happening is if I go to advanced and responsive, I can hide or show widgets depending on the device. So what I'm doing is I'm hiding those two at the desktop size. I have these two menu options here. I show them on desktop, but I hide them on tablet and mobile, and then vice versa for this little button trigger here. Now, there may be a cleaner way to do this. Maybe I'd want to do some coding or some schema markup, but this, for demonstration purposes, works really well across all device sizes, and a beginner can do it. Once you understand you can hide or show something by device, it's kind of helpful because sometimes you just need a totally different, design configuration. So then how did I get these items to space out like this? Good question. I'm actually trying to remember. Okay, I set them to space between. So what it will do, once that hidden one's gone in preview mode, what it does is it puts space between the items. So if I had a fourth item, it would be over here on the right, and there'd be space between it and this menu, and there'd be like equal space. But in non-preview mode, like in editor mode, it's actually putting space between all four elements because it hasn't officially hidden this one yet. But that worked pretty well. I did have to fiddle with the margin on this menu here to try to get it to sort of center a little better as the screen is sized up and down. So that, in general, is how the menu works, with the exception of one item, which is the menu has a trigger for a slide in. And a way to do that in Elementor, there's probably others, but if you go to templates and pop-ups, I just built a pop-up. There's probably other ways to do this, and you have to be thoughtful about um, Google understanding your site. But what I did is I just used the pop-up builder and I built a Tesla menu pop-up, and I'll show you how I did that. Okay, please disregard these three headings in the background. They don't have anything to do with this. It's from a different experiment. But what we care about is the pop-up here. So when I created the new pop-up and I clicked on the settings here in the bottom left, I was able to set a width. I could set where I want my pop-up to be. I want it to be on the right. I wanted the content to be positioned top. I could make it center, right? I was just mimicking whatever Tesla had. So I set it to fit the height of the pop-up to be the fit to screen, because you can sell it to fit to the content, but I said fit to screen. I can set a width, right? 320 seemed to be a good width. It even worked, I think, on mobile. I may have adjusted it on mobile. I can't remember. I could also do like a vertical width setting on mobile, which is probably pretty smart. Like I could just say, hey, be like 90% the width of the screen. Yeah, I could fiddle with that. Okay, so going back to the desktop view, um, I want the overlay on. I do want a close button, and I can choose how I want it to animate, slide in. There's different options. So I set all these up. Um, and then if I go through, there's some styling things. There's a box shadow effect here that can be set. The overlay color here in the background can be changed. The close button itself can be styled. I didn't do too much with that. And then under advanced, there's some options here. The weirdest one is this, is I had to set a way to trigger this pop-up from a link or a menu. And so this little bit of code here, I guess I forgot about this. I can put this in the YouTube description. It's basically like a named anchor link. So what I have is this code, and then if I go back over to my menus, the menu link itself. So this menu is linked. If you look down on the bottom left of my screen, you can see my dev site URL. See where there's a hashtag menu-Tesla? That corresponds to the code that I put in here. So under appearance menus, I just link this menu button here, and that will run the pop-up. So I'll put that in the description. And then for the display conditions for my pop-up, I told it to just run on my Tesla page, but you could say entire site. And then I told it to trigger on click, and then I saved it. So that is how I got the menu to trigger. So what else is left? We've got these sections. The nav. How did I get the nav to stick up there at the top? Well, all I had to do is I went to advanced and then motion effects. And so what I want to do is set this to sticky, because by default it was set to none. So I set it to top. So I say, hey, stick this to the top and go ahead and stick it on all devices. And that's really it. So when I scroll, it'll stick. And you can actually do this to lots of different elements in Elementor, but I just want to do that with the menu. And when the scroll snapping is turned on, these things whiz by. So it's not really a big problem where you have this overlap. It doesn't matter because it happens so fast. So there, our nav sticks. We've accounted for mobile. We've accounted for the slide in menu. So then we've got these panels that I built, and I'm just duplicating. Right click, duplicate all the way down. And then maybe I make some tweaks, like on the solar panels, I changed the wording on the buttons. And on the very last one, I just have one button. So that's all I needed. And I dropped in my little menu down here. That's it. That's what, that is what this page is. So the final thing would be go back to those settings, advanced, scroll snap, turn it on, and update it. And then when we refresh our page, we're going to get this. I need to refresh it because I turned it off. Once I refresh it, the scroll snapping should be on, and we should have something very close to the Tesla site. So as a reminder, here's Tesla, snap, snap, snap. Now I go back over to my site, and we get the very same snapping. Very cool. Finally, I'll show you in terms of mobile responsiveness. This works very well. So as I scroll, it snaps around. Works great. So that is how to replicate something like the scroll snapping Tesla website. Thanks for checking out this video. Please let me know if you have any questions. Please consider subscribing. We're going to do more sort of teardowns like this so people get an idea of the amazing things you can build in Elementor, no code builder. Yeah, alrighty, cool. Thanks.